Before any of you say anything about my last breakdown, it's perfectly fine to let olive oil reach the smoke point. Just watch Adam Ragusia's video if you don't believe me. We start off with a brief interaction from Chapter 2, jump to 8, a tiny bit of Chapter 7, then to 9, a little cutaway from Volume 3, and finally back to 8. Oh yeah, Chapters 2 and 8 appear in 3 episodes each. We certainly got a lot of mileage out of them. Apart from a few lines that were cut at the beginning, Weiss's talk with Yang is essentially untouched. In a previous iteration of Redux, we actually tried to remove some of the pauses to speed things up, but in doing so, revealed just how fragile the scene is. If there was ever a moment we didn't want to rush, it was this one, because it's easily one of the most heartfelt conversations in the volume. If it ain't broke, don't break it. In contrast to that, the bandit camp scene was modified significantly. We broke that one plenty. The goal here was to make it feel less like an info dump and more like a fight scene with words. There's a rather swift back and forth going on, helped by the characters occasionally interrupting each other. Because of the increased snappiness, when they do stop to take a breath, the tension in the air is much higher. Real quick before I move on to the patch notes, towards the tail end of production, I pitched the idea of darkening the lighting in this shootout to increase the suspense. And wow, Random Words didn't just bring down the brightness of the scene, he transformed it entirely. The glow of the scroll cuts through the darkness, muzzle flares cast light on surrounding surfaces, and yet still respect the geometry of the room. He also manually painted in shadows on both the walls and the characters. And he did all of this in one session. Yes, the flashing lights meant we needed to put this card at the beginning, but it was more than worth it. Freaking look at this. Cinder's eye flares up as they approach the bandit camp. A slightly unnatural lip curl on Raven was fixed for a few frames. I brought back Cinder's fire sound effect from Volume 1. I also voiced Watts' grunt of pain. Look at me go. Ilya no longer draws attention to Yuma's attack before it happens.
I'm sorry. You can make it up to me by helping us stop Corsican Finnick.
No. I'm sorry.
Blake no longer draws attention to Sun's attack before it happens. Oh yeah, side note, I didn't do anything to this punch. It sounded that crunchy in the original. And lastly, Kali just straight up shoots a white fang guy now, and it's one of my proudest achievements. I'm gonna need to briefly touch on minor spoilers for the Volume 5 finale, and also a scene from Volume 8. I'm not making any assumptions about what you've seen, so this is your warning. Going once, going twice, bye-bye. When Volume 5's finale aired, you might recall a bunch of criticism floating around regarding the choices Cinder makes. She brings up Ruby a couple times with Salem, and Watts warns her about the risks of trying to satisfy her grudge with a child. But in the battle at Haven, Cinder completely ignores Ruby, even when she's unconscious. Initially, we tried cutting out Watts' warning in an attempt to put a lampshade on the issue, but we took so long with this project that Volume 8 came out, and Watts references the warning that we removed. So back in it went. I was about ready to give in and leave the scene as is, but one morning when I woke up, I had a thought. What if Ruby wasn't Cinder's goal? Here's how we handled it. We opened Chapter 7 with a brief exchange between Cinder and Salem. This was done in part to establish the plan to work with bandits and to remind the audience of Cinder's true desire, which is the power Salem promised her. But it also allowed us to communicate a conflict brewing between these two. In the original, Salem merely asks Cinder to inform Tyrion
that I wish to have a word with him.
Instead, we keep Salem silent, watching Cinder as she leaves. The implication we're trying to make is that Cinder is becoming impatient with how long it's taking to get her power, and Salem is beginning to detect a hint of defiance in her. Next, we've got the Raven confrontation. After the maiden power is demonstrated, we hold on a shot of Cinder's face when Watts talks. In the original, Cinder has a few speaking lines here, the last one in particular prompting a menacing smile. But by removing that context, we can give off the impression that she's off in her own little world, completely infatuated by the power she just witnessed. And lastly, Watts still warns Cinder about the dangers of pursuing her own desires. But instead of referencing Ruby, we cut to a shot of Amber, and then the clouds from earlier in the chapter. This shifts her motives entirely and unambiguously to the maiden powers. Using red cutaways also visually connects this moment to Watts' meltdown at Cinder in Volume 8. I'm telling you, editing is cool. By having Ilya's note to Blake appear in Chapter 5, there's rather a substantial gap between these two moments now, and it sort of feels like that plot thread is put on pause for a little while. Apart from this one line,
Hey, ugly!
Emerald and Mercury are just kinda here for show, although it wouldn't be the first time. If I was to give a Most Improved award to one of our chapters, it would definitely go to this one, because for a good long while, Redux Chapter 7 was so boring, it was insane. Our initial attempts to fix it were to speed it up, largely by deleting each and every pause, but that just made it worse. Giving no breathing room to an episode this rich in dialogue makes it feel even wordier than it already is. After a lot of troubleshooting and a bunch of revisions, I can finally say that we're happy with the state the chapter is in. It certainly put up a fight, though. No questions this week, although I'd like to mention that I'm typing all of the subtitles for the chapters manually, so do let me know in the comments if you spot any typos. I'll fix them as soon as I see them. Hope you guys enjoyed the chapter, and I'll see you next week. Catch you later.